Hey, my name is Kyle, and I serve as the lead pastor at Trinity Church in North County. If you call Trinity your home, if you're with us on a typical Sunday, I'm glad you're taking a few moments today to watch this video. I expected for us to be together the last time I saw you. I thought we'd be joining together today on this Sunday, but things have drastically changed over the last week. If you're not someone who is with us on a Sunday morning, maybe this video got shared, maybe you happened to stumble upon it, but I'm thankful that you are watching it as well. I want to do a couple things with you with the time I have. One, I first want to look at why we've made the decision to not gather together today. Then we'll have a small break. Kara, one of our worship leaders, will do a couple of songs, and I hope that's a meaningful time for you to listen to her, to sing along if you know the song, but hopefully that'll be a sense of peace for you on this Sunday. And then after that, I'm going to come back and hopefully encourage you and challenge you, specifically if you're a part of our church or if you find yourself as a follower of Jesus, what it would look like for us to be the church during this time. Because these times are crazy. I just have to admit, I have not been prepared. I have not taken a class on how to deal with the pandemic. I'm really just doing the best that I can. I'm meeting with people and I'm seeking wise counsel, but this is really uncharted waters. The thing I find comforting is that we're really all in this together. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter what normally divides. We are facing this with one another. And so I just want to explain why we as a church have chosen to not gather together today. I just want to say that it's not a decision made out of fear. And maybe you've heard some pastors say that. Maybe you've seen someone put that on their Facebook or Instagram, or maybe you've seen a tweet about not responding, that we don't want to live out of fear. And I agree with that. But I also just want to be honest with you. If you've been afraid during the last few days or week, if you've been anxious, I understand. I just want to say I see you, I recognize that, and if I'm honest, there's been those moments where I've felt that for myself, where I haven't been real sure of what the next hour or day or what the next week is going to look like. We don't want to make decisions out of fear, but let's be honest, a lot of us have felt that. When the whole world begins to pay attention to something, when everything seems to be shutting down and we see the chaos around us, even though we may not want to respond out of fear and we don't want to be led by fear, and as followers of Jesus specifically, we want to have a trust and belief that we're going to be okay, but we also see the reality of where we're at. And in the scriptures, we see times where the author of part of the Bible, maybe it was an angel or the voice of God, would say something like, "Fear not," or "Do not be afraid." And actually, I find comfort in that. I find comfort knowing that God at times, I think, expects us to be afraid, that he expects us to be anxious. But I also know and believe that he's with us in those times. So it's this balance of understanding our fear and anxiety, but also clinging to a hope that we have. In the New Testament, there's a guy named Paul who writes some letters to some people who become Christians, and he helps develop some churches, and he writes these letters back to them, and he says at one point, "Be anxious for nothing, don't be anxious. But when you are, pray." It's almost as if Paul says, look, I'm gonna tell you not to be anxious, but I know there's gonna be these moments where you find yourself worried and full of anxiety. And when you do, there's a hope that you can cling to. And so we didn't make this decision out of fear. Honestly, we've made this decision because we feel like we want to do our part to do what we hear scientists and medical professionals say is to flatten the curve, to limit the exposure of the virus to people. Our St. Louis County executive made the decision to not have groups gather more than 250. And although we're just under that, we also know that when those groups gather at that size, they want there to be social distancing. They want there to be some space between people. And to be honest, that doesn't always happen in our congregation. We're a congregation that enjoys to be close to one another. And so I felt like that would be difficult for us to do. But I also know that it's not just the number of people, but it's the It's the number of people who fit into the range of high risk. And high risk is defined by older adults, which can be 60 and over. And we have a lot of people that we really care about in our congregation who fit into that category. We also know that the high risk people are those who maybe have gone through chemo, or their lungs are unhealthy, or they're having trouble with their heart condition. And they too should not gather in groups of more than 10. And so we wanted to pay attention to that. And so we felt like the best thing for us to do was to just hit pause and not gather together as a group. And so one of the things we often talk about here at Trinity is that we don't want to just be a church that's in the community, that we don't just happen to find ourselves in North County on Shackelford Road. We don't want to be a church that's even just for the community, that we kind of meet in this place and we think we have something and we need to get it to everyone else in the community, but really we want to be a church that is with the community. So the decision we made wasn't simply about just us, but also about our community. And so when we heard the St. Louis County Executive give that decision, and we know that churches don't necessarily fit into that category, but we saw it as an opportunity to say, look, we are with our community. We want to do our part to again flatten the curve. And so we're gonna do things differently right now. And we feel like that's the best for all of us. And so I hope you understand that. I hope you understand this was not a decision based on fear, but really what we think was really being faithful to what we feel God has called us to here and now. And so things will look different. We're going to gather like this today, but we're already brainstorming and trying to figure out what it will look like in the coming weeks. And we hope even during this time that there would be great moments for people to gather together in other ways. We know it's important. We know that the fear doesn't only come because of the sickness, but what comes along with it. We know many of you are anxious and fearful, maybe because of the economy. I know several of you who are being impacted financially because of the line of work that you're in. Some of you who are in the medical field are feeling the pressure of what could come and the need that we will have for you and the hospitals and doctors and nurses and the desire that you all will have to bring healing to the people who come. And that is a great weight that is on your shoulders, and I'm thankful that God will use you during this time. And so it's in those moments that we gather together today. Maybe not how we expected, but I know and believe that God will speak to you during this time. At this moment, Kara will lead us in a couple of songs, and maybe they'll be new to you, and maybe you just want to listen to them. Maybe they'll be familiar, and you'll sing along. But in these moments, my prayer is that God would just bring a peace to us in our fear and anxiety, maybe through these few moments, through a couple of songs, that God would speak to you and to me during this time.
I see the King of Glory coming on the clouds with fire. The whole earth shakes. The whole earth shakes. I see His love and mercy washing over all our sin. The people sing, Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. I see a generation rising up to take their place. Will sound same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. And yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Oh, yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy and all my days. Oh, yes, I will. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails, He will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. He's working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. Yes, I will bless your name. And yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy and all my days. Yes, I will, and all my days. Yes, I will, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise. Lord, I'll glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against, and I choose to praise. Glorify the name of all names. And nothing can stand against. And yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Oh, yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy and all my days. Yes, I will, all my days. Yes, I will, and all my days. Yes, I will, all my days. Yes, I will.
Well, I'm hopeful that that was a meaningful time for you. I'm thankful that Kara was able to give some of her time to help make that happen. Well, this time I want to read a scripture to you. It's found in Acts 2. It's the account of really the early church and what that looked like. So Acts 2 in verse 42 through 47, it says this: They devoted themselves to the apostles' teachings and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. I want to just real quickly talk about what that looks like, and talk about this idea of how it could impact us today. First thing I want to point out is the early church were not gathering in church buildings as we know them today. And actually, when we think about the church, it's important for us to see that the church isn't a building, that the people of God are the church. I have a saying, and it's not mine, but a lot of people say that we don't go to church, we are the church. And so from the time my kids were little, I would try really hard to teach them that on Sunday mornings when we were getting ready, we were not going to church. We were going to a church building. We were going to a place where people would gather together. But I would encourage them and say, they are the church. And so in the midst of this, it's been interesting to just have those dialogues with my kids. They've asked if we're closing the church. Are we canceling church? And I've had to remind them once again, no, we can't close the church because you guys are the church. We are the church. And so it's important for us to understand, even though we're not meeting together today, it doesn't mean that the church is closed. It just means that the church, the people, are not gathering together in this moment as we normally have. But it doesn't mean that we can't gather together in other ways. What did it look like for them? They devoted themselves to the teachings. They were reading the scriptures. And so during this time, when we have a lot of time, I would encourage you, maybe you would read the scriptures. You would download YouVersion on your phone and you would start a reading plan, and maybe that will be new for you. Maybe if you have kids, you would read it with them. And so maybe during this time, you would commit yourself to that. Maybe you want to call a friend or use the internet or text someone what you're reading and have a conversation about it. We can still be committed to the apostles' teachings, to the scriptures, even though we may not be gathered as we normally do. They committed themselves to fellowship. Now, this is important for us to understand. The way we flatten the curve and hopefully keep from the virus spreading too much is that we have this social distancing. But it doesn't mean social isolation. It's really important during this time that we pay attention to that. As I talked about fear and anxiety a few moments ago, there's some people who maybe live by themselves for whatever reason that might be. There might be these moments for them where they feel like they're alone, that they're isolated. And we see here that daily people were meeting and gathering together. And so we have to pay attention to what that looks like for us today. They did the breaking of bread and they had meals with one another and they would pray. And I hope that you are praying for our leaders of our country, the leaders of our community. You're praying for me as your pastor, and maybe you find this video today and you have another pastor. I'm praying that you're praying for them as well. But prayer was important. And then it's very interesting that it says in verse 44 that they were together and had everything in common. It was for the common good. One of the things I think we often struggle with, specifically maybe in our country, is we often have this idea, I believe, that if it doesn't impact me, then it may not really matter. That if I don't directly see the impact, then maybe I shouldn't be concerned. We see this in a lot of ways. We see this in poverty. We see this as we think of racism and injustice. We see these things, and oftentimes we might believe that it doesn't impact me, and so should I really care or be concerned? And I think here we see that it wasn't about a certain person, but it was about the community. It was about the group. The health of the group was not determined by one person, but the health of the group maybe was determined by the person who would have been seen on the bottom. How healthy are they? Were they taken care of? See, we have to change the mentality of me to we. The decisions I make don't just impact myself, but it impacts those around me. And we see that happening in this scripture. The early church cared deeply about sharing their possessions with one another. If they had excess, they would share with someone who needed it. If they had hoarded lots of toilet paper and they knew someone else who needed some, they would share. This idea of collecting and accumulating large amounts of things, I think might go against what we read here today. That maybe if we have a little extra, we share that. And so in context of that, and then in context of what we see as the greatest commandment, someone comes to Jesus and asks, what is the most important of all the laws? And Jesus said really two things, that you would love God and you would love people. And you would love people as you love yourself. Again, back to the idea of what I would want for me, I should want for the we. And so what does that look like for us moving forward? Just because we aren't meeting today, and I'm not sure what the next couple of weeks are going to look like. We're brainstorming and trying to get creative, but things may look different for the next couple of weeks. But what doesn't have to change is the idea of neighborly love. That we would really love one another during this time. That we would care and have concern for the other. And so pay attention to the high-risk population. Who do you know that fits into that category? Maybe you need to give them a call. Maybe you aren't afraid or fearful of getting out and going to the grocery store, but maybe they are. So what errands do they need run? Do they need you to go to the grocery store and pick something up for them? Would you do that? Would you pay attention to those who are at high risk and might need a little help during this time? Call them, check on them, make sure they're doing okay. The other thing that we're going to do, that we have been doing, is our mobile market on the end of this month. We've already contacted to see if we can move our mobile market up. That's been an important thing for our community. We've given away about 40,000 pounds of food over the last couple of months. And so we're trying to move it up a couple of weeks. We're also paying attention, as we know Ferguson Florissant has already said they'll be canceling school, and we're waiting to see what other districts might do that. And so I've reached out to the St. Louis Area Food Bank. We have a partnership with them, and just telling them we're available for whatever you need. And so would you pay attention to that? As we call for volunteers, would you step up if you're able to? If you're not in that high-risk population, would you help us as we try and get food into the hands of our neighbors who need a little extra during this time? Our nonprofit, Empower North County, is continuing to do those things. And so if you haven't liked Empower North County's Facebook page, I'd encourage you to do that. If you haven't liked Trinity's page, I'd encourage you to do that. We'll keep you up to date on how we're helping our neighbors during this time. And then just kind of some tangible things. It's interesting right now, we live such busy lives and we're consumed with so many things. But the one thing we have right now is time. And so I would encourage you to spend that effectively. If you happen to have children, I would encourage you maybe have a meal together. Maybe it's been a while since you've done that. Maybe you would just slow down during this time and enjoy a meal with one another. I want to encourage you, maybe you would look up some scripture if you have young children, and you would have them do some art and include some scripture. If you do that, would you just post that and tag Trinity Church in that? I'd love to see maybe what kids are coming up with during this time. Maybe that would be encouraging to us even. So take advantage of this time that you have. If you know someone who is not high risk, that maybe lives alone and they're comfortable getting out of their house, maybe you would invite them over for a meal. Again, we want to pay attention to those who feel isolated during this time. I just want to encourage you. You are the church. If you are a follower of Jesus, you are the church. We don't have to gather in this place. It's important for us to do that. It's important for us to gather together and to be encouraged and to be challenged. But right now, it is an incredible opportunity for us to be the church in our neighborhoods, in our workplace, to be who God has called us to be. We can all participate in this. If you're listening today and you would say, you know what, I'm not a follower of Jesus, I'm not sure what I know about God, but what I do know about you is that you have an opportunity to care about those around you. And I want to encourage you to do that as well. My hope is that by making some of these decisions, that we will limit the number of people who are exposed to the virus. That after all of this, some people may say that that our country overreacted. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that because my hope and my prayer is that by using wisdom and paying attention to what people are asking us to do, that maybe fewer people than expected will lose their life due to this. And so, church, those who are listening, as I always say when I end a message and we end our time together, as always, you are sent to love God and to love people and to serve our community. Love you guys.